Okay, nice. Can you see the presentation, the first slide, Edgar Allan Poe? Can you all see it?
Yes.
Yes, doctor.
Wonderful. So today we have an intro session, and forgive me if I will talk too much today because this is not a discussion session. The discussion sessions will come later. So tonight is will be, or let's say it will be a fully intro session through which we know more about Edgar Allan Poe and get to know something about his short story, The Telltale Heart. This is the outline, or let's say this is the agenda for tonight's session. We'll start with a brief biography about Edgar Allan Poe, and then we will move to the historical context of his short story, The Telltale Heart. And then finally, we will end with the study plan. Okay, so let's start with the biography. Edgar Allan Poe was born into a theatrical family on January 19, 1809, in the 19th century in Boston, Massachusetts. And his father, David Poe, he was a lawyer turned actor, and his mother, Elizabeth Arnold, she was an English actress. Actually, uh, the child's Poe's tragedy, it first his first tragedy struck, or let's say it happened so early when both his parents had died before turning 4 years old. So before turning maybe 3 or 4 years old, his two parents they died, and this marked his first tragedy because his life is so full of tragedies. And because of this separation, let's say because of the death of his parents, he was stripped of his base town, hometown, and he was separated from his siblings. And eventually, he was taken in by the Allen family in Richmond, Virginia. He was raised and taken in and brought up as a foster child by the Allen family. And because of this name, Allen, we know that his name is Edgar Allan Poe. So he got his middle name, Allen, from the Allen family. John Allen, the foster father, Poe's foster father, he was a tobacco farmer and he was a very rich businessman. Allen, the father, he never legally adopted Poe. And their relationship was not a good one. It was not a friendly relationship. It was a violent and stormy relationship, especially after Poe reached his teenage years.
Your mic is off, doctor.
My mic is muted?
Yeah.
Okay. Why haven't you told me? Okay. So I need to get back. Or okay, no problem. Need to
It works now.
okay. So I need to start from the very beginning. Okay. So again, okay, no problem. No problem. Okay, so
It just
yeah,
happened.
it
It
just
just
happened.
happened. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, okay. So where did I stop?
The father, Alan, was very violent
Uh,
to Edgar.
excuse me, can you start over? I just entered. I couldn't even enter from the beginning because the link was invalid, but I solved it. So can you please from the beginning يا أنا آسفة جدا.
Okay, no problem. Okay, so we were talking about Edgar Allan Poe's first years. He was born into a theatrical family, so born of two parents, or let's say father and the mother, both worked as actors and actresses. His father was a lawyer turned actor, and his mother.
Was muted again.
Yeah, yeah. The doctor is muted again.
What's wrong? Okay, no problem. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Something wrong with the application, maybe. Okay, so Edgar Allan Poe was taken in after the death of his parents as a foster child by the Allan family in Richmond, Virginia. And his foster father, John Allan, did not have a good relationship with Edgar Allan Poe. The relationship was not a quiet relationship. It was a violent, it was a stormy one. And Allan, the foster father, he never adopted Poe legally. And because of this, maybe he did not finance him fully, but again, he financed him in his early years. Poe was dependent on Allan for financial support, especially his early years at school in England. And actually, Poe's school years proved to be very, very formative and very creative. As Poe started to read stories, he started to read poems by legendary and famous authors and writers such as Lord Byron and Charles Dickens. So he started to get acquainted with the literary canon of English literature and some famous literary figures as Charles Dickens and Lord Byron. And it was at this point, it was at this time, Edgar Allan Poe's passion started to emerge, began to arise, and he started to write and compose works of his own. Actually, Edgar Allan Poe's writing talent bloomed and prospered when he was 13. And at this early age, he started writing poetry and working all the time very hard. In 1826, Poe joined the University of Virginia, and while his foster father, Allan, funded Poe's education at his private school in England for 5 years, he, however, failed to support him when Allan ran into financial problems. The father even refused to finance Poe's education, in effect. Desperate to stay in college, to stay at university, and to remain writing, Poe turned to gambling as an immediate source of income and to pay off his debts. However hard he endeavored, the young writer Edgar Allan Poe could not afford to keep himself enrolled in school or at the university. It is even rumored that he set his own furniture on fire to stay calm, or let's say to stay warm, during the cold winter nights. In the end, he found himself in even greater debt during these hard times, and ultimately had to leave and withdraw from the university. Unable to continue and to go on in his education, he turned to alcohol and gambling to console his grief. He left Virginia to find his literary aspirations and adventurous appetite. And around this time, Poe published his first collection, Tamerlane and Other Poems. These are collections of poems, and they were published in 1827. And these poems, or this collection of poems, proved that writing was still his true passion. Anxious to find paying work, he joined the United States Military Academy at West Point in 1830, becoming a sergeant major. Aware that he would never get money from his prosperous father, and aware that he would never inherit him, he started on a literary career at the age of 21. He turned to writing full-time, living in different cities, especially East Coast cities, before coming back again, or let's say going back to Richmond, Virginia. Though creatively inspired, he was unable to financially support himself by literary work alone, and he fell into poverty. Dejected, desperate, and feeling disappointed, with nowhere to go to and with nowhere to turn to, Edgar Allan Poe, he journeyed to Baltimore. He went to Baltimore, the home of his deceased father, where he was taken in by his relatives, the Clem family. In 1835, he secretly married his 13-year-old cousin, Virginia Clem, and a year later, he married her publicly in a more open ceremony. In Baltimore, Poe's primary occupation was an editor. He started working first as an editor for many magazines and newspapers, literary newspapers. And in 1836 and 1837, he worked as an assistant editor for the Southern Literary Messenger while publishing fiction and book reviews. He started getting acclaim and getting fame as a critic and a writer. And actually, his criticism was so harsh, it was not that gentle. His criticism and his reviews were so harsh and was so unkind and cruel. And within a few years' time, Poe was known. He was known throughout the literary community of America for his recognized critiques and influential lectures. However, Poe was not suitable for editorial work. Like his natural father, he was an alcoholic. And because of this, he was dismissed by his employer, and he moved then to New York City and later to Philadelphia. During this time, Poe was an icon. He started publishing several works, including his only complete novel, The Narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym Nanticoke, and his other short story, The Fall of the House of Usher, Tales of the Grotesque and Arabesque, and this is a 2-volume collection of short stories. The Murders in the Rue Morgue, this is a detective short story, and The Telltale Heart. Of course, this is not his own, let's say, this is not everything about his productions. These are just examples of his own writings. In some of these stories, Poe used the first person, and he was talking about the use of opium. He was talking about the use of heroin and drugs. And people thought that he immersed himself in drugs, that he started to be an alcoholic because of the much use of alcohol and drugs and opium in his own stories. His stories were so sad, and they were ghost stories, uh, taken to such an extreme that people considered him to be a little bit strange. While his writings were well regarded and well considered by so many critics, his financial position was actually not that good. It was continuously precarious. And by precarious, I mean it was not bad, it was not good, it was so bad. And that's why he took on a series of editorial positions. But again, his alcoholism and strange behavior and strange conduct and controversial temper and mood continued to plague him. His career went up and down until his masterpiece poem, The Raven, was published in 1845. And this poem was his breakthrough and his most famous work. It became a big bestseller. However, Pope failed to win many friends due to his unpleasant mood and temper, although he was celebrated as a gifted poet. Back to his social life, uh, Poe loved his wife very much, his cousin, and they lived together in New York City until she died from tuberculosis when she was around 20, leaving Poe in acute mental and emotional distress. The next 2 years, they were disastrous for Poe. Poe found himself moving so fast towards the edge of poverty and self-destruction. He gambled, he drank, and he became involved in a number of romantic relationships with women. In brief, everything that he had created for himself fell apart. He died on October 7, 1849, at the age of 40, under mysterious circumstances, and without being able to explain what had happened during the last years of his life, or the last days of his life. His death is one of the most strange and unnatural things about his life. He was found on the streets of Baltimore in a bar, ill and drunk, and he was wearing clothes that did not belong to him. And a couple of days later, he died in a hospital. Nobody knows what exactly happened to him and what killed him. So this is only a brief autobiography, or let's say this is a brief bio about Edgar Allan Poe, the American poet, short story, and novelist and critic. Let's now move to the historical context of the Telltale Heart, and we will deal with two things: literature in the 19th century and the psychological element of Poe's fiction. Let's start with literature in the 19th century. Edgar Allan Poe, he wrote at a time when the United States was undergoing a rapid economic and geographical expansion. American explorations, geographical explorations of the Pacific region, and the westward expansions, all these developments captured the imagination of the public, or let's say of the American public. And of course, literature responded to such a significant event. So during the mid-19th century, the most popular authors in the growing United States were, let's say, they were concerned with adventure fiction. They only wrote adventure fiction such as James Cooper, Washington Irving, and Herman Melville. And for Poe, Edgar Allan Poe, he wrote stories like A Descent in the Maelstrom and The Gold Bug. And these two stories, again, they reflect the public's fascination with explorations, expansions, and adventures at home and abroad. Novels in this era, or let's say novels during the 19th century, they typically imitated British literature until new themes arose and started to emerge from authors who were particularly American. Pope was one of these American authors. He created a very unique American literature. He helped popularize the short story form. So Pope is responsible, let's say he is partly responsible for the popularization of the short story form, because so many magazines and so many newspapers started publishing short stories, and because of this, there have been new audience with new stories every month. And these magazines became an important part of popular life, and Poe published many stories in them, though few brought him solid popularity. Edgar Allan Poe was called by so many critics as the father of detective story or detective fiction. So Poe's legacy, it's undeniable when it comes to detective story or the literary genre detective fiction. And through his short stories, especially Murders in the Rue Morgue, he became one of the first practitioners of the detective story, in which a mystery is presented, and this mystery must be solved by an observant inspector whose viewpoint is the reader's as well. In his short stories, he sought to fashion and to create tales of terror, horror, mystery, and suspense based on language and mood. So we can say that all the mystery dramas, all the mystery tales and stories, all the horror and vampire work that we see nowadays and we read nowadays is owed to Edgar Allan Poe. He is a master of Gothic fiction, and Gothic fiction is a genre of literature that combines fiction, horror, the supernatural, and romance. And this literary genre was so popular in the 18th and 19th century. Central to his work is brevity, and by brevity I mean being brief. So his short stories are so brief; they are not that long. So this is one of the most important marks of his short stories. A very important characteristic is that these short stories are very brief, and they are full of musicality and psychological depth. And this is not everything. Other characteristics: allegory, alliteration, repetition, and rhyme. So he made use of all these literary tools, and these tools made him so special and made him so elevated and made him, let's say, distinguished his own text from any other contemporary, or let's say from amongst his numerous writing contemporaries like Herman Melville, like Nathaniel Hawthorne. Let's now move to the second point, which is the psychological element of Poe's fiction. Poe's writings in general, not only the Telltale Heart, they emphasize the dark side of humanity and the dark side of nature versus the optimistic and the confident spirit of America because of the explorations and expansions that happened during the 19th century. So people, or let's say the American public during the 19th century, were very optimistic. They were confident because there was so much scientific progress and rational thinking. And these two things, the science and the rational thinking, they were dominating, they were revolutionizing industry and agriculture. But when it comes to the telltale heart, we have lots of themes, or let's say some ideas and ideologies that are conveyed in the short story. The telltale heart, first, it exemplifies Poe's ability to expose, to explain, to shed light on the dark side of humankind. And it's a forerunner of novels and films dealing with psychological realism. The Telltale Heart, it's a first-person narrative, or let's say it's told from a first-person perspective. And this story is a psychological portrait of a mad narrator who kills a man, and afterwards he hears his victim's endless heartbeat. So this is simultaneously a horror story and a psychological thriller. But this story shows the conflict between the rational and the irrational world. And by rational, if something is rational, it means that it is based on logic, it is based on evidence. But if something is not rational, so it means that it's not in accordance with reason and logic. This short story shows and portrays the perplexity between the rational and the irrational. And I'm going to explain this briefly. Poe, in general, he does not reject rational science. He believes in rationalism, and he does not reject and he does not refuse rational science. But at the same time, he undermines, he makes, let's say, he does not highly respect the faith in rationality in some of his stories. So we have this contradiction inside his psyche. And that's why in The Telltale Heart, this short story, it tells of a man who ironically and let's say paradoxically believes in the need for making logical and calculated decisions, but is eventually overcome by psychological forces that are inexplicable, that cannot be explained. And these forces stem from his irrational and unstable nature. Of course, we will come to this later when we start reading the short story, and we will better understand this philosophical issue, which is how the rational conflicts with the irrational in the telltale heart. So while Poe's works or Poe's The Telltale Heart displays a strong interest in rational science, his writings also explore the psychologically mysterious aspects of the human condition and the inexplicable elements of the universe. Poe differs from so many writers of his time in another significant way, which is how he views literature, how he looks at literature. His writings actually produce an undeniable and a deep psychological effect on the reader. And this is due to his belief that all good literature, this is what he believes in, what Edgar Allan Poe believes in. He believes that all good literature must create a unity of effect on the reader. And this effect must do two things. Number one, this effect must reveal truth, and it must evoke an emotional and psychological reaction. And that's why his works are so brief because brevity concentrates on producing this unified effect on the reader. Now let's now come to the final part of tonight's session, which is the study plan. So we're done with a biography of Edgar Allan Poe, and then we said something about the historical context, and then let's now come to the study plan, and this is your own assignment. First, I need you to watch 2 documentary movies or films on Edgar Allan Poe, and I sent you the links of these 2 documentary films. They are on the Telegram channel. They are optional, but they are highly recommended, so you can at least do only one if you don't have time. Then there is a third video, and this is the second step in the study plan. This is another video. It's not a documentary one, but it's about why should we read Edgar Allan Poe. So these 2 steps, the first 2 steps are just, let's say, they provide very solid background about Edgar Allan Poe as a writer and as a critic. Number 3, now this is the first step concerning the short story itself. You're not going to read the text, but I need you to read first the summary of the short story. And in the PDF file I sent you on Telegram, you have all links for all these steps in the study plan. So you need to read the summary of the short story, and it's just 1 page. So before starting reading the text, just get an idea about the story, the plot. And after you finish this step, do not read the story. Watch the movie first. Watch the movie. It's downloaded. You have the download link. So go to the PDF file and download the link and watch the movie. And then after you finish watching the movie, you answer the pre-reading questions. I sent you about 1 page that has some questions that I need you to read and study and answer. So these questions should be done before reading the text. So all these 5 steps should be done before starting reading the text. Number 6, this is the beginning of the text. So you have 5 steps. And step number 6, this is the starting point. You have the audio, you have the text, and you have the vocab file. I need you to listen to the audio and at the same time read the text. You read and listen at the same time. And I sent you a PDF file that contains the difficult vocab in case you find the text difficult to understand. And after you finish, I will send you, this is not ready, I will send you maybe next week, mid next week, some questions that I needed to answer after you finish reading the whole text. So this is the study plan. So you have about seven steps. So the first 2 steps, videos, 3 summary, 4 again video. Number 5, some questions to answer before reading. Number 6, audio and the text. And number 7, some questions that will be sent to you next week, inshallah. So this is, I think this is everything about today. It's a short meeting because I think that the coming sessions will be a bit long because we are going to discuss more and answer some questions and do some activities together, pair work activities and group work activities. So there will be so many tasks to do starting from next session, and it will be about maybe at the end of next week. So you have about 7 days, or let's say 7 days at least, 7 days at least to do all 7 steps. So this is everything for today. So do you have any questions? In the coming sessions, of course, you will do much talking. I'm not going to talk. I'm going to listen to you. We are going to share ideas and get involved in discussions. Yes, Mayar?
For me, I don't have any questions, but I thank you for your efforts, and I'm really excited to reading this story.
Thank you, Mayar. Thank you for your words. Thank you. Good luck, inshallah. Any other comments? Okay, great. So as I said before, this is only an intro session, and the intro session we should know more about the author, about the historical context, and so on. But starting from next week, or let's say starting from the coming session, things will be completely different. I'm going to listen to you. We are going to share ideas. There will be some exercises and some activities to do online. And so I need you to finish these steps as soon as possible. And once you are ready, let me know. And you have about 7 days at least, from 7 to 10 days. So I think this is enough, right? Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you for coming. See you inshallah soon. Good luck. Take care and enjoy reading. Assalamu alaikum. Bye. Take care.
Um,
Bye.